Victor made a person. Starace made a figure. Here's your look at the brand new Starace, the Horror of Frankenstein, the Creature, 1/6 scale collectible figure. Starace is proud to introduce a new version of the classic horror figure Frankenstein's Creature, clad in the outfit from the 1970 film The Horror of Frankenstein. This figure comes with a tabletop to strap the creature down, a test tube setup, and other ghoulish accessories. Bodies are a lot like puzzles. Sure, they're easy to take apart, but they're a whole lot harder to put back together. Just, of course, before we get a closer look at the brand new Starace Horror of Frankenstein Creature, I'd like to thank the folks over at Starace that did provide the sample we could have a look at. This is the standard release of the Creature. There's also a deluxe version that's going to come with the tabletop as well. The standard version is slated to release the second quarter of 2024 for $279.99. As for the figure's height, you're looking at Frankenstein being just short of being 12 inches. He's actually about 11 3/4 of an inch in height. That translates to a figure that's about 30 centimeters tall. If you do have the funds and the necessary space, the deluxe version of Frankenstein's Creature is going to also come included with the tabletop, but the difference of the prices are exactly $100, in that the deluxe version is $379.99. The standard release that we're looking at in this review is $279.99. The standard, though, doesn't do too bad for itself, in that Frankenstein's monster does also come included with a display stand, cast here in black plastic. Does have the Horror of Frankenstein printed very brightly here in blood red. And then, of course, you'd have yourself the adjustable cradle stand that then can take the creature and accommodate rather nicely, put it on the shelf. Again, though, if you have the space, by all means, go with the deluxe version. That's going to come include with the lab table. But again, for more modest-sized spaces, the standard display stand is going to come in still rather nicely, offering up some rather odd oddities packed along with this creature. Starace also, for reasons unknown, included some tricks with their treats. They included a jack-o'-lantern, first of all. It is nicely detailed. I don't know why it was packed along with the creature, though. On the bottom, though, I can't help but notice there's also a hole. Perhaps it's going to attach onto the neck of the ball joints. Maybe this is going to be a tease for a future figure they're planning down the road. They also packed along with it a tiny little gift box that says Halloween. Little tiny happy jack-o'-lanterns are sticking out the top. And they also as well included a bat. Now, the bat, I looked online in the listings for all the accessories belonging to this figure, and bat was nowhere to be found. The deluxe version also didn't include this either, so again, it could be a tease for a future figure that they've got planned down the road. The bat looks good, and actually included with it was a little post. The post plugs into his underbelly here. There's a little hole right here, and that plugs in place. But again, it's nowhere listed online for the accessory counts, and it doesn't belong at all. It doesn't plug in at all with the test tubes, for example. So it just must have been something they decided to throw in there as well. Now let's look at the things that actually do belong with the standard release of the creature. Notably, though, as well, one thing I didn't also get with this was the body drape cloth. It's listed online. It's also included with the deluxe version, but the actual lab cloth was nowhere to be found. What we did get actually inside the tray, and it did involve a quite extensive amount of assembly, was the actual rack of test tubes. The test tubes, actually, when you get them out of the tray, start at basically just the base here. You get these post pieces that plug into the provided holes here, and then you get all these additional clips. You probably saw me removing them at the beginning of this review. You get actually 6 of them, and they plug into various different places. You basically attach it onto the side here, which is my only real worry, is I wouldn't want to do this too often. The clamp sits just perfectly around the same size as the post. Plugging that on and snapping it off, I would imagine, snap probably being the word you don't want to use, I would imagine it would start to probably develop stress marks. So this may not be something you're going to want to do too often. But once it's all attached, it gives us a really interesting looking setup here. And again, all the various test tubes that are in the film. All the test tubes, by the way, are attached by these rubber hoses. And actually, they're all of one piece. The only part that actually was separate, while although the other 4 are attached by these, was this section right here. This test tube, for reasons unknown, was just probably just did it so there was a lot less things. I mean, obviously, you want to have just a string, a train of all these little things that you have to connect. You got to make sure that you don't snag any of these in the process. But you clip these all in. This was the only other thing that had to be plugged separately. Plugs in basically here, and then you just got a separate tube that then just fits inside the larger beaker, larger test tube. It's a very elaborate looking setup. Again, you have to be a little bit careful, though, snapping them all in place, but when you're finally finished with it, it's a nice little way of displaying along with the figure. Something else, though, that can be nicely displayed with the figure is a severed head. Wait, what? The figure also comes included, first of all, with the head in jar. I mean, obviously right now we're just only looking at the jar itself. It's just a clear acrylic plastic tube. But you also get yourself as well the severed head. And severed head is, as you can see, clearly severed by the blood on the bottom of it. It's nicely detailed also as well. And while there is no liquid inside of it, you basically just take the head and literally just plunk it in place. Nice little way of displaying it. Without really the lab table that would have got packed along with the deluxe version, there's really no place to store any of these accessories, so I'm just going to ultimately display these on the shelf along with the figure. Something that also can be displayed with the figure is a bloodied axe. Now we're talking. Get a load of the blood on the axe here. I love the way they've aged the different levels of blood here. So it's slightly darker here in the bottom of the blade. Not sharp at all either to the touch. Slightly lighter and more crimson to the top. And it's got a nice sheen to it. So it looks like he's used it repeatedly. Blood is all stained at the top of the handle that's plugged into the head. And then you've got like little fingerprint sections where he's held it in his hand, and a few little blood entrails on the bottom of it as well. It is really one of the nicest looking bloodied axes. Not that I really have a long list to go by, but it's definitely one of the coolest looking accessories we've gotten with a 6-scale figure. Whether I don't decide to display this with Frankenstein or I decide to display it with something else. Really nice looking axe though. Of course, to hold that axe, he's going to need himself some hands. He has relaxed hands right now. Those are on the ends of his forearms. But he has, again, the remedy for that. He has some gripping hands there, too. The hands themselves are fairly soft and plastic, so they'll be quite easy as well for him to hold the axe. And again, it's just a case of taking the figure as it is right now, just removing the hands from the provided pegs. The pegs you want to make sure are still staying behind because he doesn't actually come with an extra pair. Going to remove them on both sides. Just unplug them fairly easy, in fact. Just take the gripping hands and you're just going to plug them back in place. Do that on one side, and then of course we're going to do it on the other side as well. Plug that in there too. And then when that's plugged finally in place, then you're just going to take yourself the axe, pry the fingers. Now you could also do this too. It might be even easier just to put the hands around the axe first. Just get the thumb around it. The thumb is really, usually it's always the case, the thumb is always the hardest thing to kind of get around the weapon. But let's just maybe, there we go, slide the axe down there, plug it back into his hand, and then you can have the figure displayed with the axe. Nice way of displaying him. The last thing we'll do for the finishing touches of the creature is that he also comes included with his collar piece. Notably missing, though, is that he doesn't have the chain. The chain isn't connected onto the end of the brace. It may be in the case that, I'm sure, like in pictures, I've looked at the images online, and it seems to be the case that there's a chain connecting on the end of it. The one, though, I was provided with just doesn't happen to have it. It doesn't open in any way that I can see, at least. It's bolted very visibly on either side. So the easiest way to really get that around the creature's head is obviously just to take the head itself and detach it, divorce it altogether from the body, which is pretty easy to do. And then you just take the neck brace, the collar piece, and it just fits it back over top of the neck. Plug that back in place, and now you got the creature there with the collar around his neck. It's close in quarters, though. It's going to cause a little bit of problems. Just get the threads out of the way as well. It's going to cause a little bit of problems in moving the head back and forth. My only real worry, though, about this being so close like this is that if it's going to start to scrape the bottom of his neck. See where the chin is basically so close to the neck brace like this, that I worry that moving this back and forth, it hasn't happened yet, and maybe if you can just bring the head a little bit as well. I just don't want to move it back and forth too frequently, just because I don't want to wear away the plastic on the bottom of his face. Speaking of his face, though, let's right now just actually put the figure down here for a second. I want to take the hand and remove it from the axe. We'll put the axe just off to the side. We're probably going to be bringing that back in for final looks. Let's plug the hand back in place here. Yeah, getting a closer look at Frankenstein here, or more specifically, the creature. Nice looking head sculpt here. It's not very much, it's very different, obviously, from the Universal Monsters Frankenstein. In fact, it doesn't have the bolts on the side, but it does have somewhat of the familiar staples there along the top of his head, where basically his entire dome would have been just attached to get access to the brain. Stapled on the sides, you can see some really nice extensive detailing that they've added to the figure. These, by the way, are all seem to be sculpted in. It's not just a case where, like, if you were to run your finger along this, you could actually feel the grooves in which the actual scarring is left behind. So they didn't simply just paint it in place. The head sculpt generally is quite good. I like the slightly darker colors they did around the eyes. Kind of gives him that real nice dead look. A really generally somber look on his face as well. I think they've, like I said, done a pretty good job on him. I was really quite also impressed with the way they've sculpted the body, in that I was kind of expecting kind of fairly thin, tapered off body, but he's actually quite wide in the torso. Of course, over top of it, he's got himself his blue tunic. The tunic has a tied off top here. They've already taken the liberty of tying that off, but ever so often you might find me just kind of bringing these threads down, because these threads, especially this one right here, seems to keep moving up on me. But I like the way it's stitched. Of course, you obviously got the open holes there on the sides of his shirt. He's got some nice bandages wrapped around his arms also as well, and some very nice visible scars there on his arms also. If I can, I'm just going to bring this up just a little bit, because I did want to show you guys the way they've sculpted the body. A nice thick frame on him. I didn't realize that Frankenstein was working out as much as he is. And he also has some nice scarring there on the side of his chest there too. Really nicely done here. I'm really overall happy with this figure. It's got, again, some scars there on the side. Just slightly off-colored skin, too. So you definitely know there's something not quite right with this guy. Very surprised as well when we're looking at the legs. I mean, obviously he does have himself the black slacks, but the actual pants, if I just move them up a little bit, there's some substantial padding that they've added right here. Probably just enough to bulk up the figure down below here. He has even down below here in his calf, so it's pretty much just thick padding that they've added from the top all the way down here. It doesn't seem to limit the figure's articulation. You can still easily quite still easily move the knees, but there's definitely some padding happening here for the top and the bottom of the legs. And of course, then he's got his big clunky shoes. Doesn't have the platform shoes necessarily that Karloff's Frankenstein would have had, but again, nice looking boots. And they're, by the way, soft plastics too, so it's going to make things still pretty easy when it comes to moving these feet back and forth. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the articulation here on the figure, going back to his head sculpt here. Obviously, it's going to make things a little bit harder now that we've got ourselves the collar piece around his head, but the head does still move back and forth. You can move it up only by just a little bit and move it down. In addition to what he has here, he also seems to have, if I can kind of move everything out of the way, he seems to also have a hinge at the base of his neck, because it seems to be able to move the head quite freely up and down there that way as well. So it seems to have one here and one here, right pretty much where the neck starts. As for his arms come out. Now, I did notice, though, with the arms on mine, that they're really tight. I don't want to force them too much, but it seems like if I was able to force them, yeah, I can get them out at 90 degrees, a little less than 90 degrees. The arms do move forward and move back. And even though he really does have the bandages aren't in the way at all of the elbow articulation. You can still very easily move his arms forward and back. There's also a bend there in the elbow. Just want to make sure, of course, I'm not detaching the hand in the process. Let's just plug that back in place. As for his abdomen area, let's just move his arms back up, or move his chest back up. This is actually softer plastic. Can you tell by the way I'm squeezing it with my thumb that he does have a bit of a crunch here, but mostly the articulation is lower down here. Even though this is softer. Legs do split out still, despite the fact the padding that he has. He also moves the legs forward and moves the legs back. There's a swivel there at the top of the thigh. Single hinge, it seems, only in the knees. And then there's the additional articulation back and forth on the ankle, and again, that rocks back and forth as well. So again, like, this is the standard release of the creature. It's going for, what, $279.99, and then the deluxe version of the creature is going to go for $379.99. What that does give you, at least in differences, is the fact that the deluxe version is also going to give you, like, the background. It's going to give you, of course, still the Bunsen, the beakers, and the test tubes. That's still going to be included. But you get like the wall facing, you get the tabletop, you basically get like the sections to strap down the creature. So again, like, if you have the space, this is of course one of those things where even if, as cool as a figure may be, if you just don't have the space, there's no way you can accommodate having the lab table out and again having all the backdrop diorama wall behind him. But if you have the space and you have the additional $100 or so that's going to be to get the one for the $379, a nice looking figure it certainly would be. As this one was the standard release provided nicely by the folks over at Star Ace, we didn't get the chance to look at the lab table or the back wall piece. But I can do, again, from just looking at the standpoint of looking at the figure solely, I'm really happy with how this one turned out. Not as big of a fan necessarily of the 70s Horror of Frankenstein. I mean, again, you know, close my eyes and think of the iconic Frankenstein of like the old Silver Age silver screens. And I mean, obviously, like the old original Karloff Frankenstein is kind of my go-to for Frankie. But I gotta say, still, Frankenstein has been nicely done here. Recreated, put together piece by piece by the folks over at Star Ace. And it's a nice release on their hands. As we now wrap up the review for the wrapped up creature, the finishing touches, of course, while this guy's on the turntable, is including the severed head, one of my favorite accessories that came included with the figure. Of course, we can't overlook the fact he also comes included with the elaborate test tube setup. That rack, though, did require a little bit of assembly on my part, was pretty straightforward. Although once you get everything together, I would really hate to start taking things apart. The clamps that fit the test tubes to the rack are so close in size to the post, it's not something I would definitely want to, once, like I said, I put everything together, I don't know how often I really want to take everything apart. It's, though, for the meantime, going to be displayed on the shelf along with the Frankenstein creature here, which again, I think has been nicely put together, so to speak, from the folks over at Star Ace. Now, this was the standard release that we've already had a look at here. There was, again, the deluxe version, a difference of $100 between the two. Both figures, as of right now, are pre-orders on various online sites with a release date of the second quarter of 2024. For your video question, let me know down below in the comments section, what's your favorite portrayal of Frankenstein. Is it one from the original 1931 film? Is it the one that we got here from the 70s? What's your favorite version of Frankenstein's creature? Let me know down below in the comment section. Big thank you once again to the folks over at Star Ace that were kind enough to provide the sample of the brand new Horror of Frankenstein, Frankenstein's monster or Frankenstein's creature that we had the chance to have a look at in this review. If you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and want to be on board for more, I will tell you though, even though we are done pretty much now with Frankenstein, there will be more Star Ace reviews coming your way. In the meantime though, if you want to get your fix, popping up will be playlists of things that I've looked at for Star Ace in the past. That includes, of course, the stuff that they did so well with the Harry Potter, and of course, all the many other licenses that they're doing currently. Definitely check out that playlist if you have a little bit of time on your hands, or whether they're your hands or some other dead guy's hands. Definitely going to be a lot more videos, guys, coming your way. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.